What's in a name? Using celebrities to promote products or causes is nothing new. However, when a country is torn by political strife, when men and women of good courage are forced to take sides, there will always be a price. This is profoundly relevant in the entertainment business when the public pays for your success and longevity. Some issues are worth the sacrifice. Courageous celebrities in athletics, motion pictures, entertainment, and creative expression found that in the mission of the American Civil Rights Movement of the 50s and 60s. To identify and applaud them today cannot begin to credit them for what they endured during the dawn and hotbeds of the movement. Disfavor from production companies, associates, and even distance from people within the races and community must have been challenging. Their careers and their families paid a price. But in the words of Malcolm X, quote, "If you're not ready to die for it, put the word freedom out of your vocabulary," end quote. And Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., quote, "If a man has not discovered something he is willing to die for, he's not fit to live," end quote. And also Paul Robeson, who stated, quote, "The artist must take sides. He must elect to fight for freedom or slavery. I have made my choice. I had no alternative," end quote. Puts the mission in place and lends context to why bravery was a byproduct of the character required to stand tall for the movement. The list of celebrities is long, with black and white, ethnic and religious groups represented, American and others who believed in the rights of mankind. Among the short list of white celebrities that most will recognize, you will find Marlon Brando, Burt Lancaster, Paul Newman, Joan Woodward, Charlton Heston, James Garner, and Elizabeth Taylor. Several celebrities performed at the March on Washington, notably Joan Baez, Peter, Paul, and Mary, as well as Bob Dylan. The list included Hollywood producer Frank Makowitz. In 2011, BET honored 16 black celebrities for their contribution to the movement. Number 1, Sammy Davis Jr. As one of the greatest entertainers in show business, Sammy Davis also lent his celebrity and finances to the civil rights movement in the 60s. After he refused to appear in any clubs that practiced racial segregation, several venues in Miami Beach and Las Vegas were then integrated. Next, Josephine Baker. Josephine Baker circumvented the racist restrictions of America by becoming an iconic entertainer in France during the 1920s and 30s. In the cause of civil rights, she worked with the NAACP and famously spoke at the March on Washington in 1963. Paul Robeson, known as a singing and acting legend, the great Paul Robeson is equally known for his political activism. In the 1940s, he was an early advocate for civil rights, fighting against lynching and job and voting discrimination. Jackie Robinson. In 1947, Jackie Robinson broke Major League Baseball's long-standing color barrier when he joined the Brooklyn Dodgers. After his retirement in 1957, the Baseball Hall of Famer served on the board of the NAACP and co-founded the Freedom National Bank, a black-owned and operated commercial bank based in Harlem, New York. Muhammad Ali. The boxing icon's activism began in 1964 when he joined the black religious nationalist group, the Nation of Islam, and changed his name to Muhammad Ali. He became a cause celebrity when in 1966 he refused to serve in the army and fight in the Vietnam War, famously commenting, "No Viet Cong ever called me a nigger." Harry Belafonte. The singer and film actor is just as known for his involvement with civil rights causes. A confidant of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., he contributed a great deal to the 60s movement, speaking at the March on Washington, bailing leaders out of jail, donating large sums to organizations like SNCC, and even providing for King's family after he was assassinated in 1968. Sidney Poitier. As America's first black leading man of film, Sidney Poitier was more shaped by the civil rights movement than by politics. During the 1960s fight on equality, the acting legend became the personification of Black America's dignity in mainstream cinema, not to mention the first brother to smack a white man in a film without repercussion, In the Heat of the Night. In 1963, Portier became the first black man to win a Best Actor Oscar. Dick Gregory. With his clean-cut suits and jokes about racial discrimination, groundbreaking comedian and activist Dick Gregory became America's comic voice of the civil rights movement, but he was just as famous for his involvement with the cause, participating in a number of demonstrations and getting arrested several times for civil disobedience. His activism spurred his run for mayor of Chicago in 1966 and for President of the United States in 1968. Lena Horne. The legendary singer-actress is famous for groundbreaking roles in Cabin in the Sky and Stormy Weather, both in 1943, but she was also a longtime fighter for equality, refusing during World War II to perform for segregated USO audiences. She participated in the March on Washington and performed to benefit groups like NAACP, SNCC, and the National Council of Negro Women. Bill Cosby. The iconic comedian and actor did his part for the civil rights movement by breaking barriers in the world of television. Already beloved for his widely appealing stand-up routines about his life growing up, Cosby proved to TV execs and audiences that a black man can play a lead in a television series. In 1965, after being cast in I Spy, he became the first black male lead in a dramatic TV series. He also contributed greatly to the financial causes of black colleges. Mahalia Jackson. The First Lady of Gospel, was a well-known supporter of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and the Civil Rights Movement, famously singing, as per King's request, at the historic March on Washington. Unfortunately, she'd also be given the sad task of singing at the iconic leader's funeral in 1968. Langston Hughes, a pioneering poet, playwright, and novelist of the Harlem Renaissance. Langston Hughes was also an early civil rights activist, using his art to promote Black pride 40 years before the Black Power movement and rail against racial injustice. Aussie Davis and Ruby Dee, the profoundly gifted couple, were as involved with the fight for civil rights as they were with their stage and film acting. They famously helped organize the March on Washington and served as MCs for the historic event. Following the assassination of Malcolm X, Aussie famously eulogized the slain black national leader. James Baldwin. During the civil rights movement, the openly gay novelist, essayist, playwright boldly became the literary voice for the era, writing works that not only exposed the ugly truths about inequality, the fire next time, but preached about the deep love needed to remedy the problem. He was also very involved with groups like SNCC and the Congress for Racial Equality, and he attended a meeting with then Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy to discuss the moral implications of the civil rights movement. And finally, Nina Simone. This singing giant was the musical voice of the civil rights movement, writing and singing such odes to the struggle as Mississippi God Dam, I Wish I Knew How It Would Feel to Be Free, and Young, Gifted, and Black. Shortly after King's assassination, she penned the song Why the King of Love is Dead. Proud Americans all,